HOA Karen changes my house numbers, didn't know it's the sheriff's home and gets arrested. Comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. Here's a bit about me before I explain the incident that day. I have been the sheriff of Pinewood County for almost 7 years now, following in my father's footsteps after he retired. I'm not the kind of guy who throws his title around. Most of my neighbors in the Cedar Ridge subdivision had no idea what I did for a living when my daughter Emma and I moved in last year. I preferred it that way. After losing my wife to cancer 3 years ago, Emma and I needed a fresh start. The modest 4-bedroom house in Cedar Ridge seemed perfect. Good school district, quiet streets, and enough space for Emma to have the dog she'd been begging for since she was 8. The homeowners association fees were steep, but the amenities seemed worth it. Community pool, well-maintained walking trails, and 24-hour security at the entrance. Little did I know that those HOA fees were essentially paying the salary of a neighborhood crone named Deborah Winters. I first noticed something was off when I received a letter about my mailbox being non-compliant 2 weeks after moving in. The previous owners had left a perfectly functional black mailbox, but apparently, it needed to be forest green with gold-plated numbers. I complied, not wanting to rock the boat in my new community. Then came the notices about my trash cans being visible from the street. They weren't. My grass being a 1/4 inch too high, it wasn't. And my daughter's bike being left on the front porch overnight, guilty as charged. Each notice was signed by Deborah Winters, HOA president, with a signature so aggressively penned it nearly tore through the paper. I'd never actually met Deborah face to face, though Emma had described her as the lady who takes pictures of our house and frowns a lot. I made mental notes to introduce myself properly at the next HOA meeting, but between my demanding schedule as sheriff and helping Emma adjust to her new school and life without her mother, it kept slipping down my priority list. It was a rainy Thursday evening when the trouble really started. I was working late at the station, dealing with a county-wide emergency response training program, while Emma stayed with our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher who had quickly become Emma's surrogate grandmother and my emergency childcare contact. Around 7 p.m. I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this James Sullivan?" a woman's voice demanded without introduction. "Yes, this is James," I replied, distracted by the stack of paperwork on my desk. "This is Deborah Winters from the Cedar Ridge HOA. I'm calling to inform you that you have 24 hours to correct your house numbers or face a $200 fine." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, what's wrong with my house numbers?" "They're brass. The HOA regulations clearly state that all house numbers must be black wrought iron with the approved font. This was outlined in Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the welcome packet you received." Her tone suggested I had personally offended her by not memorizing all 87 pages of the HOA guidelines. "Ms. Winters, the house numbers were there when I purchased the home. The inspection didn't flag them as an issue." "Well, they are an issue," she snapped. "And it's Mrs. Winters. I've been lenient with you since you're new, but it's been almost a year now. The non-compliance ends tomorrow or you'll be fined. Additionally, your porch light is the wrong warmth of white. It should be 2,700 K, not 3,000 K. Before I could respond, she hung up. I sighed, added "by house numbers" to my mental to-do list and turned back to my work. Having dealt with far bigger problems as sheriff, a petty HOA dispute wasn't worth my energy. I had no idea how quickly that perspective would change. The next morning, I left for work before dawn as usual, not noticing anything amiss. Emma had a teacher workday, so she was staying with Mrs. Rodriguez again. It wasn't until I returned home around 6 p.m. that I realized something was very wrong. My house number had changed. Where 1422 had been displayed in brass numbers the day before, new black wrought iron numbers now read 1133. I stood on my front lawn, keys in hand, struggling to process what I was seeing. Had I somehow driven to the wrong house? No, there was Emma's purple bike leaning against the garage, and the dent in the mailbox from when I had backed into it last month. Someone had changed my house numbers without my knowledge or consent. As I was examining the new numbers, noticing they had been screwed directly into the siding without regard for the previous holes, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Rodriguez. "James, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you all day. There's been a terrible mix-up with the emergency services." My blood ran cold. "What happened? Is Emma okay?" "She's fine, she's right here, but James, an ambulance showed up at my house this morning looking for your address. Emma had an allergic reaction to some new snacks I gave her. Nothing too serious, just some hives. But when I called 911 they couldn't find your house. They said 1422 Cedar Ridge Drive doesn't exist." I felt a wave of both relief that Emma was okay and fury at what could have happened. As a first responder, I knew all too well how critical those minutes could be in a real emergency. The dispatcher said they were redirected 3 times before a neighbor pointed them to my house, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. And later, when Emma and I went to your house to get her inhaler, we noticed your house numbers were different. I see that, I said, my law enforcement training kicking in as I examined the new numbers more closely. Mrs. Rodriguez, would you mind keeping Emma for a bit longer? I need to look into this. After assuring Emma I wasn't mad at her for the allergy scare and thanking Mrs. Rodriguez profusely, I went into full investigation mode. I knocked on several neighbors' doors, but no one had seen who changed the numbers. Finally, Mr. Jenkins from across the street mentioned seeing a ladder against my house around noon. Thought it was odd, he said, scratching his head. Lady in one of those track suits was up there fiddling with something. Figured you'd hired someone to do some work. What color tracksuit? I asked, though I already knew the answer. One of those pastel pink numbers. Blonde hair and one of those, can I speak to your manager haircuts. Drives a white Lexus SUV. Bingo. Deborah Winters had taken it upon herself to not only change my house numbers but to assign my house an entirely different address. One that didn't exist in the county records or emergency response systems. The sheriff in me recognized this wasn't just a petty HOA dispute anymore. This was reckless endangerment, vandalism, and potentially criminal negligence. If Emma had been having a severe allergic reaction or a more serious emergency, the delayed response time could have been catastrophic. I changed into civilian clothes and drove to the address listed for Deborah Winters in the HOA directory. Her house was the largest on the street, with a perfectly manicured lawn and, no surprise, black wrought iron house numbers displaying 1644. I rang the doorbell, maintaining my composure despite my simmering anger. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with highlighted blonde hair cut into an angled bob. She wore a pastel pink tracksuit that matched Mr. Jenkins' description perfectly. Can I help you? She asked, eyeing me with suspicion. Mrs. Winters? I'm James Sullivan from 1422 Cedar Ridge Drive. Or I guess it's 1133 now, according to the numbers that appeared on my house today. Her expression shifted from suspicion to smug satisfaction. Oh yes, Mr. Sullivan. I took care of that non-compliance issue for you since you clearly weren't going to address it yourself. The HOA has a discretionary fund for these situations. You'll find the $175 service charge on your next HOA statement. I took a deep breath. Mrs. Winters, did you change my house numbers without my permission? I notified you of the violation and gave you 24 hours, which is more than generous. The aesthetics of this neighborhood affect all of our property values. Mrs. Winters, I said, my voice deadly calm, are you aware that by changing my house numbers to an address that doesn't exist in county records, you created a situation where emergency services couldn't locate my home? She crossed her arms. That's hardly my problem. You should have updated your records. Besides, if you had complied with the regulations from the beginning. My daughter had a medical emergency today, I interrupted. The ambulance was delayed because they couldn't find our address. In an emergency, minutes can mean the difference between life and death. For the first time, Deborah looked slightly uncomfortable, but she quickly recovered. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but rules are rules. Your daughter is fine, I presume? No harm, no foul. That's when I lost my patience. I pulled out my badge. Deborah Winters, I'm Sheriff James Sullivan of Pinewood County. You're under arrest for vandalism, reckless endangerment, and interfering with emergency services. Her face went from smug to shocked in an instant. You can't be serious. I'm the HOA president. And I'm the county sheriff, I replied. The fact that you didn't know that before trespassing on my property and creating a potentially life-threatening situation for my daughter doesn't change the law. This is ridiculous. I was enforcing the HOA regulations that you agreed to when you purchased your home. HOA regulations don't supersede state law, Mrs. Winters. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As I continued reading her Miranda rights, her husband appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the commotion. Debbie? What's going on? Your wife illegally changed the house numbers on my property, which resulted in emergency services being unable to locate my daughter during a medical situation, I explained, maintaining my professional demeanor. I'm placing her under arrest. This is outrageous. Deborah spluttered. Richard, call our lawyer. I had already radioed for a patrol car, not wanting to transport a suspect in my personal vehicle. When Officer Martinez pulled up 5 minutes later, The look of confusion on his face at seeing his boss making an arrest in a suburban driveway was almost comical. "Sheriff? Everything okay?" he asked cautiously. "Just fine, Martinez. Mrs. Winters here needs a ride to the station on charges of vandalism, reckless endangerment, and interfering with emergency services." Officer Martinez's eyebrows shot up, but he maintained his professionalism. "Yes, sir." As Deborah was escorted to the patrol car, her face a mixture of rage and disbelief, her husband approached me. "Sheriff, there must be some misunderstanding. Debbie takes the HOA rules very seriously, but she wouldn't intentionally put anyone in danger. Intentional or not, her actions could have had serious consequences. My daughter has severe allergies, and today's reaction could have been life-threatening with a delayed response." Richard Winters ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I had no idea. Look, I'll make sure this gets resolved. The house numbers will be changed back immediately at our expense." "They already have been," I replied. "I replaced them myself before coming here. But this isn't just about house numbers anymore. This is about someone taking unauthorized actions that endangered my child and potentially others in the neighborhood." News travels fast in small communities, and by the following morning, everyone in Cedar Ridge knew that the HOA president had been arrested by the sheriff she'd been harassing for months. Deborah spent the night in a holding cell before being released on bail. The district attorney, a longtime colleague of mine, reviewed the case and agreed to press charges. Given her clean prior record, she was offered a plea deal: community service, restitution for any damages, and her immediate resignation from the HOA board. 3 days after the incident, an emergency HOA meeting was held at the community center. I attended, still not entirely comfortable with the curious stares and whispers that followed me. The mood was tense as Richard Winters stood at the podium, announcing his wife's resignation for personal reasons. Then, something unexpected happened. People started raising their hands, sharing their own stories of Deborah's unreasonable enforcement: arbitrary fines, late-night compliance checks, photographing children playing too loudly in their own yards. One by one, neighbors I'd barely spoken to recounted years of petty tyranny. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her voice quavering slightly. "I've lived here for 15 years and I've been fine because my roses are the wrong shade of red. But what happened to little Emma? That could have been any of our children or grandchildren." By the end of the meeting, not only had a completely new HOA board been elected, but the community had voted to review and simplify the entire set of regulations. Richard Winters, looking both embarrassed and relieved, volunteered to head up the committee for reviewing emergency protocols within the community. As for Deborah, she completed her community service at the county animal shelter, a fitting assignment, many neighbors thought privately, and attended mandatory counseling sessions. She and Richard sold their house and moved to a retirement community in Arizona 6 months later. It's been just over a year since what the neighborhood kids now call the Great House Number Rebellion. The new HOA is run by a rotating committee of 5 residents, with term limits and transparent accounting of all funds. The rule book has been trimmed from 87 pages to 15, focusing on safety and maintaining property values without micromanaging the color of mailboxes or the exact height of grass. Emma and I are doing well. She's thriving in school and has finally gotten that dog she wanted, a golden retriever named Justice who has an unfortunate habit of digging up Mrs. Rodriguez's award-winning flower beds. Thankfully, under the new HOA rules, this is no longer a finable offense, just an opportunity for Emma to learn about responsibility as she helps replant the damaged flowers. As for me, I'm no longer the anonymous new neighbor. My role as sheriff is common knowledge, though most neighbors just know me as Emma's dad, or the guy who brought down the HOA tyrant. I was even convinced to join the new HOA committee, primarily to help establish better coordination with emergency services. The house numbers at 1422 Cedar Ridge Drive are still brass, though I did repaint the porch and add some landscaping that would have given Deborah heart palpitations. Every time I pull into the driveway and see those non-compliant numbers gleaming in the sunlight, I'm reminded that sometimes standing up to petty tyranny isn't just about principle. It can be a matter of life and death. And as for the new warmth of my porch light, let's just say it's deliberately several shades off from the approved 2700K. Some might call it petty. I prefer to think of it as a small beacon of independence in a neighborhood that finally remembers what community really means.